Welcome back to Angela's Craft Room. Lovely to have you again today. Today I've got this little cute Little Piggy card for you using one of our new Stamping Up stamp sets, which is this Little Piggy. Now I've chosen to cut out my pigs. You don't have to. If you weren't going to cut them out, you just need to stamp them onto some watercolour paper, and you could cut them down like into a square or something like that, because we are going to watercolour them. But it is a cute little stamp set to have, and I have put several layers on there which I'll go through with you as we move forward with this tutorial. So to start with, I'm just going to go through what we need. So the base card is going to be 11 inches long by 4 1/4 inches wide, and then scored at 5 1/2 inches. And then on the inside, I've just cut a piece of Daffodil Delight, which measures 5 1/4 inches by 4 inches. And I've just stamped one of the other Little Piggies in Early Espresso, and I advise you stamp that before you stamp your mat inside your card. So that's the base of the card. Then I've got a piece of Daffodil Delight, which will be our first layer, which is 5 1/4 by 4 inches. And then our second mat is from the Wood Textures Designer Series paper. Now that comes in a 6 inch by 6 inch paper pad, which is ideal for card makers. Then I have taken a third piece, which I have embossed in one of the new embossing folders, Garden Trellis. It's a lovely one. And that piece of cherry, this is in Cherry Cobbler, and it measures 4 3/4 inch by 3 1/2 inches. And then I've done a piece, a square. It actually measures 2 5/8 by 2 5/8. But what it is, it's the larger square from the stitch shape framelits. So it's this one here, the largest square. So I embossed a piece of Daffodil Delight, and then I just cut it out with the stitch shape framelits. So there are layers, so it's going to be quite a layered card. And then for my sentiment, I've just used the stitch shape framelits, the very smallest oval one. So I just stamped it first in Early Espresso, and this sentiment also is in the new this Little Piggy stamp set, and I've just cut it out with the smallest oval from the stitch shape framelits, and then just added a couple of little rhinestones on there. So it's all ready to go. So I've coloured one pig, so we're going to colour this one together. So to colour that, I'm using Blushing Bride, and as usual I just give it a really good squeeze. So I've got a nice palette happening there. So I'll just pop it up there, you can still see it. And then I'm using the Stamping Up Aqua Painter. So to start with, I'm just going in lightly, and then I'm just going to start from his ear and just come down. I'm not really worried about the depth of the colour at this stage, because I just mainly want to get some colour onto the little pig. And my only tip would be, just be really careful when you're when you're going near your outside lines, like these lines here. and I'm hardly touching that. I'm just bringing in some colour on the little piggy. And then when you've hardly got any colour on, and you've just got some water, because this has been stamped on watercolour paper, we just want to add some water. Actually, I might just squeeze that lightly so we've got a bit more water. And then we're just following it round and then just going over the pink colour, and that will help blend it a lot easier for you. So to start with, all we want to do is lay down a colour and get some water over this whole pig. And if you find you've got too much water on your brush, just tap it. I'm just tapping it off to the side onto my paper toweling. So I just follow him round on his back and then just come in. So we'll just do his little feet. And you can see that I've hardly got any colour, but I'm just wanting to lay down some colour on the little pig. And as I say, if you didn't want to cut him out, if you have the stitch shaped framelits, just stamp him on some watercolour paper and cut it out with the stitch shaped framelits, and it really looks nice when you do that. Just adds to your card a little bit. So we're going to be adding quite a few layers today on this card. So now that I'm getting a little bit of colour on him, I just want to add some light and shade. I don't want him to be totally pink. Just want to add some light and shade. So I'm just adding a little bit more colour to his feet. And then when you get to the top of his leg, you're just going to brush it out. And it will just blend in really easily for you. Now, I don't use the Stampin' Up! Watercolour paper. I use the Arches 185 GSM, and I use the Smooth. You can get one that's called Rough. I think the other one's medium, but I find the Smooth, when you're watercolouring, it's just blends so lovely. So you can see that I'm adding a bit more pink to him now. So I'm just going to add a bit more across his back. Just to give him a bit more shade up there. And then I'm just brushing it out, sort of like little flicks. And if you've got just enough water on your brush, it will just blend out really easily. It's such an easy technique, and I think you don't need a lot of expensive markers. If you've got your Stampin' Up! Ink pads, you can just use the palette, like how I've made the palette here. And you can I've only used one colour on this pig, and that's Blushing Bride. And then I've just gone back in afterwards and just added a bit more colour to him. So we're just about finished him, and see, that hasn't taken very long. You might find it a bit of a challenge doing him because he's got such a large body area, I'm finding people saying that to me, that in my classes they have a bit trouble with the big body, but don't think you've got to colour that whole body in. You're just blending it, and even if it's still a little bit white in the middle, it doesn't matter. Now I'm just very carefully doing his little wiggly tail just with the very tip of my brush. You could do it with the Stampin' Right markers if you wanted to, but I find it's just as easy to, and I'll just brush that across there. So that's how easy it is to watercolour that little pig. So we'll just pop the blushing bright away, and I'll just show you. I did this one before I came on camera, so I didn't have to bore you doing two. And all I've done is I've used the blushing bright as well on the watercolour paper, and I've used olive green for the leaf and Daffodil Delight for the flower, and I've just popped a rhinestone in the middle of the flower. It's that easy. So he's dry, so I just need to set him aside so he can dry, and we're going to put this card together. So to start with, as I said, we've got Daffodil Delight, which is 5 1/4 inches by 4 inches. And I'm going to bring in the Wood Textures DSP, which measures 5 1/8 by 3 7/8. And I'm just going to use some snail. Now you just have to be careful when you're using the snail that you're very precise once you're putting it down. So I like to line it up on my grid paper. And I just don't put it quite down. Just put it at the top. And this is why I like using the multi-purpose liquid glue, because it does give me that time to move it if I need to. So just have to be a bit more careful when you're using the snail. Then I've got my piece of cherry cobbler, which I'm going to put in across there. Now I will need to use the snail for that because I've embossed it. It just needs that extra adhesive for it to go down. So I'm just going to use the snail right along each side. On the first card I did with this little pig, I did use the multi-purpose liquid glue, and it did work quite well. But it did get a bit messy. Now I'm just bringing back in my mat that we've got here happening for the front of our card. And then I'm just going to pop that down about, as long as the top is straight. So I'm just going to press that down like that. And I really love this new embossing folder. It's just really nice one. So then I'm going to put the new ribbon across, which is the double stitched ribbon, and it's 1/4 inch wide, and it's in Daffodil Delight. So I'm just going to flip it because I'm going to put some tear and tape down, because I know my tear and tape is going to hold my lace or my ribbon quite well. So I'm just going to put the first piece just so it grabs onto that tear and tape, because I want to make sure that it's going to go straight. Now don't put your card down because you've got your tear and tape on the back until you've quite so. So you just want it to be on that tear and tape. And then I'm just going to get my paper snips and snip that off. So you've got a nice ribbon, corresponding ribbon going across. And then what we need to do is see where we want to have our little pig. And I'll just see where these are going to be positioned. So I want the square to go about there. So I will just use this. Actually, I will use the tear and tape, because if it touches that ribbon, and we just use snail, it's not going to adhere to your card very well. So we will put some some tear and tape on all sides. So I'll put it on two sides first, and then just peel them off. Being a bit difficult today. Let's stick that glue down if it comes up. Then we're just going to do the other two sides, and when you put this down, you're just going to have to make sure it's in exactly the place you want it to be. Because we're putting tear and tape on it, it's going to be super adhesive. But you need to really, when you're embossing and you've just got so many layers going down on your card. So just one more to come off, and it's wanting to stick to my fingers, so you can see how adhesive it is. So we're just going to want to be able to put our little piggy so if we just go above the ribbon, and all you've got to do is just make sure the top is straight, and then it'll be super fine. Okay, so then I think what I'll do is actually put it onto our base card, which is Early Espresso, and I will use the multi-purpose glue for here. And I'm not worried about putting tear and tape on there, because I can get enough glue to the top above the ribbon, so I know it's going to stick. Those that don't know why I really like the multi-purpose glue is it just gives you those few seconds if you've put it down quite not straight, which I've done many times, just gives you a few seconds to be able to move it. Whereas with all the other adhesives, they're very strong adhesive, and so even though I've got it down, I can bring it down a little bit. Just make sure the top's straight. Even now that's letting me move it a little bit. So we're just going to grab a little bit of glue seeped out there, so I just like my cotton buds close by, and that's got quite a few layers on it. I do like to layer my cards. So we've got that there. So now we're going to bring in this peg that I did first, I coloured first. And what we're going to do is get our bone folder. Remember, it's on watercolour paper, so it's a bit stronger than the cardstock. And just be careful, we don't just want to curl him under. And he's going to go on the yellow piece, but before that we need to put quite a bit of dimensionals on him, and he's going to like as if he's popping off the card. You could just glue him straight onto the card, but it looks so much better when you do put dimensionals on him. And Stampin' Up have brought out also not only these big dimensionals, the normal size ones, they've actually brought out some mini ones, which I'll show you, because they're going to go under his ear and behind the flower, so that when I push it onto the card, I'm not going to be pushing on nothing, if that makes sense. So just grab the mini ones, and you'll be able to see straight away that they're a lot smaller. So I'm just going to use my tweezers. That's going to come off for me straight. So I'm going to pop one behind the flower, and they are very strong adhesive. They stick to the embossed cardstock very well. You just need to get that little piece of paper off, and I want to put one behind in this case, because there's all different pig images in that stamp set, but this one I just want to put behind his ears. So you'll see that it's quite strong. It's stuck to my fingers, so it's quite strong, the dimensionals. And if you wanted to, you could even put one just down near his leg. I just find with the mini dimensionals it's a bit easier if you use your tweezers. So just down near his leg, so when I press him onto the card, I'm not going to be pressing on nothing. So bring in our card. and we want him to go about there. So as I press down, I'm pressing on the dimensionals, and if you have the pig's legs just gone down a bit like that, just flip it up with your bone folder. So that's that, and we just need to put a few dimensionals just on the other piggy, and we've just about finished our card. But this is, I'm just really loving this stamp set. An easy way is just to press with your tweezers in the centre of your dimensionals, and usually that top layer comes off pretty quickly. So then I'm just going to bring in the card and just see, I want to prop him about there, and just press down on the dimensionals. You'll get to know where you've put your dimensionals, and then I'm just going to put 2 dimensionals on my sentiment, and we're done. Just press down in the middle of these, just makes it come off a lot easier. I just find by adding layers to your card, it does add a lot more interest. So I'm just going to pop this right over there, so it's just making sure it's going on straight. You could put it over the ribbon if you want to, but I think that covers too much of the ribbon. I just want to pop it so it's to the edge of my Daffodil Delight, and then it's pretty straight. So I'll just zoom out a little bit for you. So that's our card using this Little Piggy stamp set. That was the first one. I used Basic Black, Daffodil Delight, and a little bit of Cherry Cobbler and Whisper White. And on this one I've used Early Espresso, Cherry Cobbler, Daffodil Delight, and some Whisper White there. So I hope you enjoyed that video, and I hope it gives you a few tips on how to use this lovely new stamp set, this Little Piggy. So until next time, happy crafting.